Hello and welcome to Talking Law. I'm Sally Penni MBE, barrister at Kenworthy's Chambers in Manchester and the founder of Women in the Law UK. On this podcast, you'll hear leading barristers, judges, solicitors, managing partners and more talking about their lives and careers in the legal sector. This episode is supported by Salford Business School Law Group. Salford Business School offers one of the most practical legal educations where you prepare for career success studying a vigorous law degree in a friendly and supportive environment. Find out more at salford.ac.uk. Before you meet today's guest, a reminder that tickets for the Women in the Law annual conference in Manchester this November are on sale now. Please visit womeninthelawuk.com for more details. I'd also love you to watch my recent TED Talk where I discuss whether love can conquer hate. Please head to ted.com and search for Sally Penni. Today, I'm talking law with Christina Blacklaws. Christina was the former president of the Law Society of England and Wales. Christina qualified as a solicitor in 1991. She held and continues to hold a number of very high-profile positions across the legal sector and beyond, and now runs her own consultancy business, providing strategic advice, particularly in the areas of transformational change, technology developments, and diversity and inclusion. Christina revealed to me that her interest in law began at a very early stage.
I'm going to sound a bit precocious now, I think, because it started really early on. When I was a young teenager, I sort of realized the importance of the law and how it could be weaponized for good and for ill. So how it could be used to defend the rights of the vulnerable, enforce rights for everyone, but be misused and ruin people's lives if it wasn't used appropriately. So that really interested me. I was quite a political young woman, and so that sent me on a trajectory, really. So I went to Oxford, read jurisprudence there, and briefly thought about working in the criminal justice system, but very quickly went into children and family law because I think that really spoke to me. It felt really vocational. So the early part of my career, I was a children's rights lawyer.
Wow.
Yeah. So, when children are neglected or abused and the local authority gets involved, they have their own lawyer, and it's that person's job to work with independent social workers and really make sure that the voice of that child is heard in the proceedings. So it was a wonderful time. It was highly vocational. And, I really felt like I was making a difference for some of the most vulnerable people in our society. So that was my early stages of my career.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe we should fast forward a little bit. So that was the very early stages. Tell me, what are you doing now and how did you get to where you are now, really?
Now I'm doing a whole range of different things, but my route to it, I think, was probably because right from the early stages of my career, I thought of myself as an entrepreneur. So I built my own law firm, and I also built a virtual law firm using the technology that was available at the time in the early 2000s. I set up the very first alternative business structure within the Co-operative Group.
Yes.
And I think I was one of the first people to glory in the title of Director of Innovation in a large law firm.
I know, I saw it when I was doing my research. I was like, wow.
So, throughout my career, I guess I've been a campaigner, and I've also been an entrepreneur, a businesswoman, and an innovator. And those threads continue in my current career. So I have what is loosely termed portfolio career. So I'm a non-executive director with 3 large law firms. And I also provide independent consultancy for a number of other law firms, particularly around innovation and the future of legal services and diversity, equity and inclusion. And that involves a lot of speaking and conferences particularly on those subjects. But I also do a load of other stuff. So I chair a couple of government bodies in the technology and law space, one for Ministry of Justice and another one for BEIS. I'm head of faculty of the Legal Technology and Innovation Institute, which is a global organisation really focused on technology and its use in the law. And then I do a lot for the International Bar Association, and particularly around rule of law and international human rights. And last but by no means least, I sit on the QC selection panel. So I have the great honour of also selecting QCs.
Brilliant. Well, I'll come to that in a moment. But you are also on the editorial board of Legal Women magazine, which was established by Coral Hill, our mutual friend. So you forgot that in addition.
I know, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to bore your listeners reeling off 100 things that I do, but you're absolutely right. And that's something, a complete shared passion of ours. And I continue to do a lot in the gender agenda, if you like. So I sit on the Women Lawyers Committee of the IBA, for example, the international women in law work through the Law Society, and indeed through the wonderful publication from our mutual and great good friend, Coral Hill.
It's not boring, because what that list tells me is actually what a law degree, and indeed what the law can provide by way of a career. And certainly, many women in the law members, there's 22,000 of them, know that I say this consistently about portfolio careers and their importance and their relevance, really, the ability to kind of enjoy a bit more and use those transferable skills. So it's not boring. It's really, really interesting, because one of the things that arises from that is when you became president of the Law Society. Now, before I ask you a bit about some of the work that you did there, the pledge, the roundtables on women in law, where did you get the confidence from to go for it? Because I know from your successor, Stephanie Boyce, it took her 4 attempts. And so I just wonder, for you, where did you get the confidence? Because that's one of the issues for women, isn't it? Putting ourselves forward.
Absolutely. And it's something that I, in exactly the same position as any other woman, in that, I often suffer from imposter syndrome or a lack of confidence when others have confidence in me. And, and I see that with friends and colleagues and other women in the law. And it is, I feel frustrated, not at us, because actually we're like that because we've been nurtured in that way. Society has formed us in that way, but at society that has led all these amazing women not to feel their power and their confidence and their ability to use that. So it's something that as an entrepreneur and leading businesses, and indeed in my roles in the Law Society and other representative organisations where I took a leadership role and enjoyed being able to be part of a team that was making a real positive difference. And it's a bit like a drug, I think, that sort of thing. When you have that sense of shifting the needle, making a difference, making the world a little bit of a better place. I, for one, I can't get enough of it. And that's why I wanted to put myself forward. And that was really my focus, particularly around underrepresented and underestimated people. And the programme of the Women in Leadership Law was part of that.
Mm. Well, interesting, because when you were president, your focus was women in leadership, but in law and the issues affecting women. And of course, you got male allies to also conduct and be part of the roundtables which formed the report. But you were also heavily involved in the First 100 Years project, a brilliant project by Dina Dane Smith, who started the First 100 Years. I remember when it started, we all bought the toilet rolls. I think I've still got mine somewhere at the top of a brief somewhere in here. But one of the other aspects of your passion was for tech. Just tell me a little about that, especially in the context of innovation of technology in law.
Well, I first learnt to code in the early 2000s, and I could really see the potential then of shifting what was a very bespoke but quite cottage industry in law into something where, we were just much more accessible for people who perceived that they couldn't afford a lawyer. And as I said before, use that to build a virtual law firm where we had people up and down the country working through our systems within our regulatory framework, of course, but really sort of pushing the boundaries. And indeed, 95% of those people were women, because it enabled them to do the work that they loved without all of the admin and bureaucracy that went with that. And of course, now we've got Gunnar Cook and Keystone and other lawyers on demand, other massive players doing that. But I think I was one of the first.
Totally. You've got that badge.
and then, of course, when I joined the co-op to set up the ABS, then again, we used the technology that we had there to design, develop and deliver what were modular fixed fee services, very reasonably priced, and were aimed at ordinary people, so that they could, the services that they needed in the way that was going to work for them. So it's something that I really passionately believed in, and I believe that it could be good for our professions as well. I don't think we need leave lawyers behind. I think it just means that lawyers, instead of doing some rather tedious administrative work, could actually do the stuff for which we are trained, and the more interesting and the more demanding stuff, because the more complicated the world becomes, the more you do need lawyers to help sort it out. When I was president, we did a number of things. We set up with Barclays Eagle Labs, the very first legally focused incubators for startups and scale-ups to develop their law tech ideas. We worked with the government to set up an innovation fund, and part of that was used to set up Law Tech UK, which is a body that I continue to chair, actually, which looks at trying to ensure that we've got the right legislative and regulatory structure. So Sir Geoffrey Voss, who sits on the panel, has been doing an enormous amount of work around smarter legal contracts, around blockchain, and how this all fits into our legal system, but also to support the great ideas that have been generated in the UK around technology and how that is utilised for business and for small business and for individuals, and how we can export that globally. And then the final big piece that we did was a commission, which I was able to chair. And that was, it was great, good fun, because we held sort of like select committee sessions where we had witnesses and took evidence. But B, I think we came up with some really important advice to government, which was framed around the criminal justice system and the use of artificial intelligence or algorithms in the criminal justice system, and the pros and cons of that, and the dangers of not getting that right. And of course, in the criminal justice system, if you get these things wrong, the consequences can be appalling for the individuals involved.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I practice in crime. It's a really
You know better than anybody.
yes, well, it's interesting. Well, Christina, I'd like to just move away a little bit and just ask you this. Though I've been very concerned about COVID and its impact on women and men in the profession, and the availability of training contracts, albeit SQEs are in now for those coming up. But equally at the bar, the opportunities are becoming far and less. And so my question is really about what advice you might have for aspiring lawyers. And then I'll move on to perhaps established lawyers about really progression. But for those who want to enter the profession, any tips or advice?
One thing I would say is you've got to be really courageous. This is not a career for the faint-hearted. I think you've got to really believe in yourself and believe in what you're doing. You've got to really have purpose and understand your why. And then I would add to that it's really important to embrace change. When I entered the profession, it was highly traditional. You would enter the profession, do 30 years at a law firm, and retire with a nice pension. And you might have been in the same office for that entire period of time. That is no longer the current shape of the law, let alone what the future will bring. And I think to be successful in this career, you've got to be excited about those changes, not hark back to how the law was, because I really believe that's where the magic is going to happen. That's where actually the law is going to blossom as a career. I think it is tough, so you need to look to the positive in everything. So I always ask myself, if I've had a knockback, if I've had a challenge, what can I learn from this experience? How can I make me better out of this? And I think particularly for women and for people with protected characteristics and those who have been underestimated for a very, very long time. So it includes sort of social inclusion issues there. You have got to be really ambitious for yourself. One of the things that our research around the Women in Leadership and Law program showed that there is such a chronic, I would say, systemic lack of ambition for women and people with protected characteristics. So, others may not be as ambitious for you as they are for other people. So you've got to have that drive. And part of that is to be really intentional, to have a very clear plan. Now, you've got to be agile as well. You can't sort of stick rigidly to step-by-step planning, but, to really think about what you want to do and how you're going to get there. And it's remarkable how many people don't actually have that sort of plan in their lives. And if you do, it just gives you that framework, which I think is really supportive early stages of career.
Fantastic advice. I suppose a caveat I would say is, when women become ambitious, then they're described as being too pushy, or the language seems to change, isn't it? If you went to court and said, yes, I've got a strategic plan here. I'd like to be a silk by 50 and this and this and this, and I'm looking for cases that would get me there. People would probably laugh. But I think the point you make is a valid one, isn't it? To have some sort of a plan so that you can then be strategic about it. Because Lady Hale said the same thing, that we need to be strategic. And I think you were present where she said it. It may even have been at her valedictory at the Supreme Court at which you spoke. I think many people watched on YouTube, but your speech was spot on. And of course, I digress a little bit, but there is now only one woman in the Supreme Court again. The Lady Rose, who's a bencher like myself, am I in? And so we have to keep doing the work, don't we? And if that's strategizing amongst that advice, then super. Christina, can I ask you very quickly then, what about women and the progression of women? What advice would you have for example, the women that I mentor who are either 12 years call at the bar or they're about 10 years admission as solicitors, and they're thinking where to go with their careers, those women. And then there are the women who are about 15 years experience or call, and they're looking for a bit of oomph. Have you got any advice? I know, do you know what I mean? The kind who do
I
their
know
job
what you
well.
mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're sitting there thinking, gosh, is this it? You know, they've often had children, they're settling back in. Any kind of careers advice, I suppose, for those perhaps who are a little bit more established?
And I think for those women, the research evidence is that women's career in law tends to sort of start to fall off the cliff around 6 to 8 PQE in solicitor terms.
Yeah.
So for those who've got a bit further down the line, you have already been through the ringer, I would say, probably. Yeah. To continue to just to be there, to have to continue to be standing in your professional shoes, I think. And so I think it's really important to recognize that, as we were saying before, women often don't recognize their own power. And where they have got to and why they have got to, and the skills and the experience and the resilience that has got them to that place in their career. So when I'm mentoring women in that sort of part of their career, it's all about confidence. It's all about building that. Now, how do you do that? And that might be the confidence to go out of the comfort zone, to take that next big leap professionally. And in terms of the solicitor's profession, I think you've really got to do two things. You've got to be your own advocate. And of course, as you were saying before, maybe it isn't right in every circumstance to get out your, 50-page strategic plan and show it to everyone. But if you've got it in your head, then that's where it needs to be. But you need to be your own effective advocate, and you also need, I think, to sort of build your board, because we are. I'll explain that. Because we are socialized, as you said, to not be bossy, to be compliant, to be submissive, actually, in some significant senses. It's really important that we have people around us to support us not to be like that. So that's why I call it a board, because if you surround yourself by 4 or 5 people who have different skills and experience, and diversity is key in this, to you, but who are absolutely have your back and want you to succeed, then those are the people to whom you should go if you're feeling that you are, that power within you is starting to ebb, you're losing that confidence, you're uncertain about yourself and your future. And the final thing I would say, it's still on the same theme about recognizing your own power, is to use that for good. So to ensure that, when you recognize at, say, 12, 15 years, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to go, this is the help I need, but what else can I do for other women or other people, to be able to help them to get to this position, and to support them further because of all my experiences of what I know hasn't worked and what has worked. And I think that is incredibly important. And I have always found in mentoring relationships that I have gained an enormous amount of insight and wisdom about myself and about other people in doing that. So I think giving back and using your position is something that's really, really important to do, and also personally rewarding.
Yes, well, I agree with that. And I tell you, with only 6 Black female QCs in the country and very few on the bench, those of us who are in leadership positions of any sort, really, I certainly try. And I know so many women are trying. Christina, you look fantastic. So I want to ask you about how you keep looking good. And I remember seeing you when you were president. you're in a suit and then you had knee boots on. I'm thinking, crikey, that lady has taken care of her appearance for an evening event in the winter. So any tips? Because, the truth is, I'm jesting, but, I work long hours. I've got boxes all around me here, or briefs and, complicated cases. Solicitors firms, they're working long hours with client demands and so on. And given the innovations that you've talked about and developed, so I just wonder if you could share some, I don't know, tips with us, or how you manage to look after your well-being and wellness.
Oh, Sally, I'm glad this is a podcast because I'm blushing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. I thought you were going to say I'm in pajamas or something.
But yes, I have embraced the grey, so that's part of it. Is and part of it is about just being able to be authentic, and that's just not me, that's everybody, and all the research shows that if you can be who you are, you're going to be happier.
Yes.
You're always going to be happier. Things that make me personally happy, I'm not a total exercise nut, but I do make sure that every single day I get out into nature. That's the sort of, if I don't do that, I start to get a bit jittery. It could be, it could be a park, could be anything, but I just need to get out and literally smell the flowers. I do have downtime. I do make sure that I have that, but like all busy women, it's pretty limited. So what I try to do is to make sure I spend as much time as I can with the people that I love. That to me is that's so energizing and is just so important in my life. And then there's another element which I think is about being of service. Again, I personally, I just find that incredibly rewarding, and you know that for yourself as well, because you do so much for others.
Yes. Well, thank you. They're really helpful. Now, what about reading? And I want to talk about legal characters. Are you an Ally McBeal or an LA Law? I'm a Rumpole of the Bailey myself in terms of reading the books and kind of legal, I wouldn't say role models, but I just wonder, do you have a favorite book? And if you do, what is it and why? We have a book club here at Women in the Law. And I wondered if you had a favorite fictional legal character somewhere.
Well, I don't get time to watch much telly, but I think my favorite book actually isn't anything to do with the law, and it's a children's book. I think some of the best books that have ever been written have been for children, but it does have a very, for me, in a sense, this is why I went into the law, because it really aligned with my purpose and my moral code. And I think that this little book, which I would recommend to everybody, I first read it, I think, when I was maybe 10. And I reread it often because it's just so lovely. And it's The Little Prince by Anton de Saint-Exupéry.
Yes.
And for me, the sort of the very essence of it is when the little prince is talking to his friend the rose, and he says that it's only with the heart that you can see rightly. What's essential is invisible to the eye. And that struck a chord with 10-year-old Christina, and I've kept it ever since.
Yes.
What's really important in life, and I think that is something that, to bring it back to law, I think that we are often very purpose driven as lawyers. It's what is really important to us. So that would be my book. But in terms of I was trying to think about this, and obviously Ally McBeal was very much in play when I was a young woman. But I think probably I'm going to say Erin Brockovich.
Brilliant choice.
Yeah, it's a bit of a cheat though, because she wasn't a qualified lawyer and she is actually a real person. But Julie Roberts did play her in a fabulous film. For those of you who don't know, she's like a legal assistant working with a lawyer, and she's trying to get justice against a major US energy corporation that's contaminating water in her hometown. You know, she uses the law to fight for those people who are downtrodden and disempowered. And I thought she was a wonderful character. So yeah, she's my favourite.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Now, Christina, we're coming to the end, I suppose. I could talk to you all day, to be quite honest. And your tenure at the Law Society, I feel, has really left a legacy, not just because of the Women in Law Pledge and the reports you did, and indeed the technology. But it then followed I, Stephanie Boyce, as I already alluded to. And then the next president, who will be coming in October 22, will be Lubna. So actually, our solicitor colleagues have had leadership from three brilliant women. And as if that wasn't enough, you've recently been given an international award for your leadership. Can you just tell me a little about that? Because I know I'm going to pronounce it wrong, because it was delivered to you personally.
Yeah. Yes, it's the Justicia. So it's an award which is run by our colleagues in Europe who are based in Austria. And one of the founders, because we couldn't, because of COVID, have a proper award ceremony, she brought the award all the way over here for me. So it was very, very kind of her. And it was an award, a Lifetime Achievement Award, actually, for international work in relation to women in the law. So I was absolutely delighted, really chuffed to have got it. It's sitting in front of me now.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Christina, I'm so pleased about that. Well, can I ask you as we conclude, where do you see the future for women? And what's next for you? Is it to continue doing what you're doing, or have you got a grand plan on your 50-page strategic plan? Where do you see women going? Because I am concerned that actually the pandemic has set women back. And indeed, the All Party Parliamentary Group have been doing lots of research in this area. Where do you see the progression of women going? And what's next for you, Christina Blacklaws?
I share your concerns, Sally. I think it is really worrying where women are in the profession now. I think that we have gone backwards in relation to the pandemic, and I am worried that we won't continue to make progress. There's no room for complacency. We all have to put our shoulders to the wheel to make sure that women, people with protected characteristics, people who have been underrepresented and underestimated for so long, have that opportunity to just be on a level playing field. That's all that is required, actually, because talent is equally spread. And so we must keep progressing that, and it will take people like you and me and people who are listening to ensure that we continue to push this boulder up the hill. Because although to me it's plainly obvious that this is best for business,
Yes.
it's best for profitability, it is unfortunately, because we have systemic bias in our society, which feeds through into the way that businesses are managed and run, we still need to fight very hard to ensure that women, people with protected characteristics, and others have that equal chance in our profession, and indeed in our world. So we've all got to be activists for that. So rally cry to your thousands and thousands of listeners. Let's do this together. And as far as I'm concerned, I am incredibly happy with my portfolio career. In fact, if listeners want to contact me, ask me, how to do it, I'm very happy to have those conversations, because I feel passionately that for me, it's the right balance of the intellectual stimulation, the reward for doing some good in this world, and not knocking myself out constantly, which I know is such a recurring problem and leads to so much mental ill health in our professions. So, I am very happy doing what I'm doing, and I look to do more of it. I look to engage more with the profession, both domestically and internationally, around these issues about which I'm completely passionate. So innovation and the future of legal services, and how we can make this work for everybody, and particularly how we can make sure that our profession is as inclusive and supportive as it possibly can be. So those are things that are going to keep me busy, I think, for the next while, Sally.
A big thank you to Christina Blacklaws for talking law with me, Dr. Penni MBE. And thanks again to Salford Business Law Group. Find out more about their unique law courses at salford.ac.uk. If you would like to support Talking Law, then please get in touch. You can find me on Twitter. Do give me a follow at Sally Penni 1, or you can also find me on LinkedIn or Instagram typing in Sally Penni. Do make sure you catch previous episodes of Talking Law, where you can hear my interviews with guests such as the former superintendent with the Metropolitan Police, Leroy Logan, and international barrister Gerard McDermott QC. Before I go, just a quick reminder to get your tickets for the Women in Law Annual Conference, and also watch my TED Talk at TED.com. Thank you to our production team, Sam Walker and Michael Blades at What Goes On Media. I'm Dr. Sally Penni MBE. Bye for now.